I know I've said this before, but when people think of those early days of British punk, they usually just think of the Sex Pistols or the Clash. They don't always consider the other bands that were equally important to that first wave. Sure, the Sex Pistols and the Clash were important and may have grabbed all the headlines, but the conversation doesn't end there, and it shouldn't end there, because while the Sex Pistols and the Clash were focused on staging a revolution, there was another band known as Buzzcocks, and they had the audacity to release songs about falling in love, and falling in love with someone you shouldn't have fallen in love with. It's a universal idea written by a band that was without equal when it came to releasing some of punk's most enduring singles. And while some would falsely accuse Buzzcocks of selling out punk ideals, their compilation album Singles Going Steady is still considered to be one of punk's greatest achievements. Not only that, but when Buzzcocks released their debut EP in December of 1976, after borrowing £500 from Pete Shelley's father, they would become the first British punk band to release an independent single on their own record label. The name of the record was called Spiral Scratch, produced by Martin Hannett, who would go on to produce Joy Division and many others. It was a pretty bold move, but this do-it-yourself approach would become a punk rock standard not just in the UK, but also in the United States, where some of the most important bands in history didn't just wait around to be discovered by record companies. They would instead release their music themselves before record companies would finally take notice, if they took notice. And while their original lead singer, Howard Devoto, would leave the band following the release of the Spiral Scratch EP and form his own band, Magazine, his absence would allow Pete Shelley to emerge as one of the great songwriters of his generation. Both he and guitarist Steve Diggle would lead the Buzzcocks towards becoming one of the most important bands of its time, with classic singles like Ever Fallen in Love, What Do I Get, Promises, and many more. Buzzcocks are about to release a brand new box set featuring 12 of their original 7-inch singles that had been released for United Artists between 1977 and 1980. It features some other classics like Orgasm Addict, Everybody's Happy Nowadays, I Don't Mind, and more. A bunch of other gems that they released over a brief 3-year span. They're also re-releasing a number of live sets, including 30 Live in London from 2006, celebrating their 30th anniversary, which will come out on red vinyl, and Late for the Train, a 6-CD box set, live and in session. And today, we're going to talk about all that stuff, plus a whole lot more, with legendary Buzzcocks guitarist Steve Diggle on Baxy's Musical Podcast.
It's Baxy's Musical Podcast.
How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much for doing this today. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's okay. It's cool. Yeah.
It took me a little while to figure out the international calling with a cell phone. So, so I would have called a minute or two early.
Yeah.
I had to go back and look at, well, who else have I called on a cell phone? So I did learn. I did pick it up pretty quick.
I remember that back in the days, being in the States back in the day, thinking, how do you figure this out? And I know you had to take the zero off the front at one point. And it took me a while to work that out.
You start to feel kind of stupid when you have to look at YouTube videos on how to make a phone call. It's felt ridiculous doing it. Listen, I do appreciate you doing this today, because I've been a big fan of Buzzcocks for a long, long time, since college, when I picked up Singles Going Steady way back when. And it's the kind of music that, it's so iconic what that band was, and I assume that would be one of the reasons why there's something like 12 different compilations of Buzzcocks music. But it really has had a long-term resonation with people. I mean, you of course must feel that.
Yeah, I mean, when we was making those records, the early ones. You never thought how long it was going to last, It was kind of like for the moment, really, It was like, well, we'll make the album, you don't know whether it'll last 6 months or a year. And it's truly amazing. Like I say, here we are 44 years down the line, and those records still sound like it was made yesterday,
They do, and as I'm looking through the Buzzcocks website the other day and seeing all of the stuff that's coming out, and there's box sets and books of Pete's work, and for fans, it's always great to get your hands on something new packaging, and new things to read, and I'm real intrigued about the one about the UA between of those first 12 singles. That looks really cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's happened with all that is we moved record labels from EMI to Domino Records, and they kind of took over the first four albums, I think, including singles going steady. And hence they've made this box set of the singles now, because the guy that owns Domino was a big fan. I didn't realize when we signed the deal with him that he was in the fan club. It must have been a case of he came to see the band when he was like 17 or something, and he ended up buying the band in the end. But yeah, it's a labor of love putting those singles in this new box set. I mean, because we've switched different labels, each time we've switched to labels now, they've brought out these compilations. But it's been a great thing because of COVID and that we've not been able to play. And so, I've been involved in a lot of this, bringing these box sets out and different things. Because we're also on Cherry Red Records. We brought the later four albums out on Cherry Red. And, we found demos and archive stuff. So, like you say, it was great for the fans. I have a lot of great feedback saying it's great to hear stuff, things that have been lying around in the can that never came out. We brought an album out on Cherry Red, the demo album, and listening back to that demo album, it came out on 12-inch vinyl, and I thought, how come we should have used a lot of those tracks, But some tracks would get left in the can, and then when it was time to make a new album, you'd forget some of those you left behind,
Well, especially when you're talking about a career as long as yours, and as much music as you guys put together, I would imagine it's kind of hard to keep track of everything that you had done. But the thing that's always interesting to me about back then as opposed to now is when you guys were young. It was like a singles-driven type of situation. It wasn't always about making albums. It was about getting that single out and maybe thinking about an album later on. And then what you guys did was a real do-it-yourself approach, especially with the Spiral Scratch EP. I mean, that hadn't been really done before when you released it on your own record label and your own money was put into it without worrying about whether a major record label was going to come on and swoop you guys up.
Yeah, I mean, we just thought it's the most uncommercial music possible at the time, and we figured if we went to a record company, they wouldn't know what this stuff was. They might laugh us out of the building at that time, but they didn't know this punk rock explosion was about to happen. And so we just thought, let's make 1,000 singles. It's seen as like a stroke of genius, but also it was a stroke of necessity, It's often these great things happen, It's like, well, let's make 1,000 singles because we were playing shows in Manchester and, we can hear what we sound like on the record and also the fans. And, of course, that first independent record took off and inspired a lot of other bands to get some money and make their own, Quite a pivotal moment, that, yeah.
Well, it's pivotal because you saw the same thing happen here in the United States where bands were kind of taking that lead where, you had all these punk bands that were, starting their own record labels and really, taking control of their own destiny as opposed to signing a contract where, they're in debt the moment they pick up the pen.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I spoke to many American bands about that, and they kind of said, we kind of picked up Spiral Scratch and we thought, hey, we could do this. So it's great to know that Buzzcocks inspired a lot of people to do that. It wasn't the do-it-yourself thing, As you know what it was like, especially back in those days, pre-punk, to get a deal, you had to go in on your hands and knees with your tongue out begging somebody, I guess. But we kind of cut that crap out and just thought, well, let's make our own record, and let's see. And that's what we did. And lo and behold, it inspired kind of the world in a lot of ways.
But one of the things that happened, though, Spiral Scratch comes out, and then within a very brief period of time, Howard Devoto leaves the band. And I know there's been a lot written about, him leaving and why he left. But when he left and you and Peter kind of left figuring out what you want to do, did you feel like having him leave was going to be a benefit to you? Because, I mean, you really all did benefit from that decision. But at the time that it happened, was there, second guessing? Should we continue? Or how did the two of you guys feel?
Well, what happened was we'd rehearse in the back room in Howard's house initially. He'd done 10 shows with us, only 10 shows, and we just brought out Spiral Scratch. Now, me and Pete was sat on Howard's sofa in his room, and he came in. I can remember it as clear as day, and he said, I've achieved what I've done what I wanted to do, make a record. I'm leaving the band. So, we was just kind of getting attention and stuff. And he was like, what? You're the singer, But me and Pete looked at each other and we thought, well, we just looked at each other and instantaneously said, we'll carry on, Because, there was nowhere else for us to go.
Right.
And it was like, let's carry on. So that's what we did. And I think it was a great decision because Howard went on to do magazine. And but it was a good decision because that's truly what, became the golden era of Buzzcocks then.
And do you think that decision helped Pete become a better songwriter?
Oh, yeah, definitely, because, we was both on the guitars and doing things, and it changed the sound, In fact, I had a song called I Might Need You, which was very much like What Do I Get?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think before that, we had Orgasm Addicts and Boredom and those kind of jerky songs, whereas What Do I Get was a bit more melodic,
Right.
And Pete, he listened to that. I said to him, you still owe me fucking money for that. But he's very close. I had a song called I Might Need You, do what you want, don't make me blue. That was the working, and then he said, what do I get? I was like, that sounds similar to mine. Having said that, you realise that was the start of the new era. What do I get? And then I came up with a song called Promises. He sang it, but he put some verses on. I had the chorus. I left my verse on. So Promises was quite melodic as well, and of course, Ever Falling in Love and Harmony in My Head. So yeah, we had all those kind of songs then. Well, if Howard was in the band, we wouldn't have written those songs.
Yeah. People tend to mythologize those early years a bit, and you talk about how young you were and how small of a community. It was only you guys and maybe 5 or 6 other bands at the time in that early first wave. Try to kind of cast the curtain away a little bit, and what was the reality of those early days? Obviously, there had to be an audience for this stuff, but it probably wasn't universally accepted by everybody that you performed in front of. What were the reactions for those early punk shows?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. It was magical, really, in a very seedy way. I mean, we brought the Sex Pistols that did a couple of gigs at Chelsea Art College in London and stuff, but they didn't really have any press, and we'd met up with them and we brought them to Manchester and we opened up for them, and so all the press came down to review the Sex Pistols, and they ended up. They're going, wow, there's a band from Manchester. And at that point, like you said, there was only 5 bands. There was the Clash. We started 2 days before the Clash, apparently. There was the Clash, the Sex Pistols, the Damned and the Jam, and the Buzzcocks. That was it. There was no other punk bands in the summer of '76. So I had straight-leg jeans on. I remember guys at the bus stop going, he's got straight-leg jeans, because everybody was wearing flats. and you was kind of pointed out. There was all the rumbling. What is this punk rock thing? What's going on, So it was very exciting and very chaotic in a lot of ways. And we did the gig, opened up for the Sex Pistols. Then there was this old theatre, old cinema in Manchester called the Electric Circus. And we used to play there quite a few times.
Right.
And that developed like the Manchester scene, really. There was also a drag artist who had a nightclub And he'd entertain people like on their wedding nights and stuff. And in the back room of the place, he used to put bands on where he was dressed in drag. And when the kids used to fight and stuff, he'd come in from the other room, bang their heads together and throw them out, There was crazy things going on in those early days. But you kind of knew it was kind of like a carpet bomb. It spread faster than an email, all around the country and over to the States. And even in Australia, I'm figuring how do they know about the Buzzcocks and punk rock in these places, particularly in Australia and stuff.
I've never figured out the Australian thing, like how, because obviously everything is going on at once in 76, 77, but in Australia they got Radio Birdman and the Saints and these great bands that are kind of doing very much the same thing as the British bands were doing, only 2,000-3,000 miles away.
Yeah, it was very weird. I mean, I remember doing the first interview for Australia, and it was like on Virgin Satellite, and it was like talking to a man on the moon. They asked you a question, you waited about 10 seconds, and then you'd reply a slow answer, And but they'd heard of us, and of course it was via the records, It was like, it's amazing how those records travelled around the world, So suddenly Manchester came alive. We kind of put Manchester on the scene. It was like, wow, you can do it from Manchester. You don't have to go to London, And that developed on the Manchester scene then,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that those Manchester shows are kind of like Woodstock is here. There's like 1 million people who say, "Oh, I was there," and those Manchester shows, you've read it, like the guys that would form Joy Division and Marky Smith from the Fall were all there, and there's probably like 50,000 other guys that said they were all there in a club that probably had no more than 50, 60 people in it at the time. But those were really important, iconic early gigs for you guys.
Oh, absolutely, because you've got to remember, I mean, people came to those shows, and you're right, we could have filled the stadium with the amount of people, but it was a small hall. So, there was probably about 50 people there or something, and but that music assaulted the senses. It was certainly like the Buzzcocks got on stage, and it went bam straight between your eyes. This powerful, fast music, because all the music was kind of slow then, It was a bit kind of West Coast music around and, progressive bands like Yes and stuff like that. And all of a sudden we've gotten with like these 3-minute songs with these terrible tacky guitars and make this racket, this noise. And that blew people's minds. And it was a very powerful time for all that, a very exciting time, because the kind of message was you can do it yourself and that, Nobody bothered really about record deals at that point or anything. It's like, let's live for the moment. Let's make the music of how we feel now, we wasn't singing about mushrooms in the sky. We were kind of singing the human condition, People immediately connection. I feel like that as well. Oh, I see that. I get that, We never had to persuade anyone when we played a gig that, stand on your seat and clap your hands. They was kind of telling us.
Well, that really separated you from bands like the Clash and the Sex Pistols, because I mean they were singing about their thing, but no one was really. I mean, other than you, were singing about love and falling out of love, and real universal themes that were were very, very different from everybody else. Was there anybody who was saying, "Hey, that's like the least punk thing you can do"? Even though I'll grant you this, you guys were playing those songs at twice the tempo of any Sex Pistol song. That's for damn sure.
Absolutely, yeah. When you think about it now, it was twice as fast. I mean, the thing was, I mean, we had the love songs, but we also had a lot of other songs. As well. I mean, I had a song called "Why She's Go" from the Chainsaw. That was political. Joe Summer loved my song on the album, a song called "Autonomy." So, but we didn't do finger pointing kind of politics. We thought that was too dumb. It was kind of like, we're not going to tell you the government's wrong. You should know that already. You know what I mean? There's life's full of complexities, So we had a bit of like existentialism and a bit of weird stuff going on with the lyrics, Some of them were slightly suicidal in some ways, but it was always wrapped up in a great melody, So when we were on the stage, the music was like, it was raw and punk rock, So it's very powerful, you know. I mean, when you say a love song, you want the Moon and June stuff. It was sort of about slitting your wrists if nobody loved you, you know.
I,
But if you look at the catalogue, it wasn't all that. But it wasn't all love songs. There's a broader things going on. But what happened was, with Singles Going Steady, the album, we'd had 2 albums out over here in Britain. We had another Music in a Different Kitchen.
and
We had Love Bites.
Yeah.
And it took us 2 years to get to the States because we were so busy over here. So Miles Copeland, IRS, he said, we need to bring, you know, you're coming over, we need to bring the US up to date. So that's how the Singles Going Steady album came out. It's like all them songs were hits in the charts over in Britain. And it's like, well, you know, that Singles Going Steady, let's bring those 2 years of chart hits up to date, you know, and that's what it was, a potted history for the US. It turned out it's be a great album, you know.
What's really interesting about that particular album, I think, because I don't know of any compilation record or, you know, best of or greatest hits collection gets a pass the way Singles Going Steady did. It's like, you know, people in the United States don't even see it as that. They just see it as like one of the great punk records of all time. I mean, it is essentially a compilation, but in the States, this was the first we had heard of Buzzcocks. And people when they took the time to really listen to it, they realized, my God, this is an amazing group of songs.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of grew into something else, like you say. You know, I mean, it kind of grew into a bona fide album, didn't it? You know, particularly in the States, because it was our first album. I mean, our first album, No Music in the Kitchen, Different Kitchen, came out a lot later in the States. It might have been 6 months or a year later after Singles Going Steady, at least. So, yeah, it was seen. And it did work as an album as well, didn't it, really? When you listen to it, like you say, you don't get the feeling it's like, you know, a bunch of singles put together. You know, it kind of works as an album, you know.
You talked about, you know, some of the songs that you had written, and Autonomy is one of my favorite Buzzcocks songs. Instrumentally, one of the strongest songs you guys had done. I love that song.
It's interesting because it was a bit part of our experimental thing that we did, that we was interested in, a bit of these angular guitars and a bit of the German krautrock and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when I was a kid, I went out, you know, I used to go out and drinking, and then my mother would be vacuuming up outside the door. So I recorded her one day. I got out of bed, recorded her, and played the vacuum cleaner, the Hoover back, you know, 100 watts. I'm going, this is what it sounds like when you got a hang up, you know. And I realized I just recorded white noise, you know, and that got me into experimental music along in Stockholm. So Autonomy was a bit like that. Now, I read somewhere, a friend of mine sent me a thing from a paper that Johnny Marr from the Smiths said when he heard the riff on Autonomy, he knew that was the new riff of Manchester at the time, you know, because he was a Buzzcocks fan. And
Right.
He said he heard that riff, and he realized that was the new way forward. Because, you know, we had the linear songs, but we also had songs like Autonomy, you know, Fiction, Romance and stuff. And that was taking punk rock in, you know, going off in other avenues, you know what I mean? It broadened the pitch for punk rock, really. The Ramones even said that. You guys, we were just kind of straight ahead. You guys had these other things going on. They came to see us in New York, the first show we played, and that's what they all said, you know, like, you guys took it somewhere else, you know.
When you talk about songs and songwriting, obviously, you know, Pete Shelley gets a lot of credit, but when you talk about those other bands, you know, a guy like Paul Weller, I don't think he ever got the credit that he deserved here in the States. I mean, there's a lot of people that, you know, have never even heard of the Jam, never mind any of the other stuff that he had done. But, you know, to have two great songwriters like those two guys, you know, have a long and steady career with all those singles at the same time, between those two guys and maybe a Joe Strummer, I mean, something was in the water in the UK at that point. Something was going on.
It was an amazing era for the songs. Like you say, you had the Jam, you had the Clash, you know, even the Sex Pistols, and you had the Damned as well. So But all these songs, and it's kind of weird that the initial, those initial 5 or 6 bands were, all had their own identity and all had great songs. Anything that came after was never as good. Any bands that came, and they kind of all set the blueprint. The Buzzcocks became the Buzzcocks, the Jam became the Jam, etc. As it went on, because we was all defined as like punk rock. And then it was like, well, we're going to make more singles and we're going to make more albums. And then you kind of saw the identity of each band then, and so what it was doing. But it was a great era for, the songwriting, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I know it's been a couple of years since Pete died, but what was your relationship like with him? I mean, obviously you're in a band, you're working close together, but there were a few years where the band was not together, and then you got back together. What was your relationship with Pete like?
Oh, very close because, we were there the whole 9 yards, I mean, we did the whole 40 years. I mean, from the initial show, I met Pete and Howard, but me and Pete got on very well. We'd go to the pub together. We travelled for years, so we were very close, Of course, it's like any relationship. You have your little arguments in there, but it's mainly artistic things, especially when we'd had a few drinks, But, we was kind of together longer than we were with our wives and girlfriends, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
I realised, we'd like had girlfriends and wives and left them, but me and him, we still stuck together. I said, we're like 2 mountain climbers. If one falls off, the other does, when they're tied together, climbing up a mountain. And but we were very close, and we'd spend a lot of time drinking and stuff as well, socially and things like that. And we discuss a lot of things about life. Sometimes I think when you hear the records, it's like you're talking to me and Pete in the pub,
Right.
and it's coming out through the songs in a way. Because, like they say, the French existentialists used to sit outside those bistros and pontificate life. We kind of did that in the British pubs, that was our thing. We were like white trash in Manchester, discussing things in pubs sometimes. So we spent a lot of time that way, me and him were the drinkers, really. But that was all research, as I put it, or intellectual fencing if we had arguments. But the arguments was good because we learned off each other. But also, we were very close and we had an amazing time together, So obviously it was a shock. He was 3 weeks older than me, so we was the same age, come from the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there was a lot that was shared between us, And starting off in those small places and see it all develop and seeing all the songs come out and all the rest of it, it was an amazing journey we had,
Yeah. Obviously, when he dies, you have a tough choice to make. Do you continue the band? Do you put it to rest? I mean, you made the choice to continue playing and touring, and I think that's actually a very noble choice to make.
Yeah, I mean, I did the odd solo shows, and I've had I had my band Flag Convenience in the 80s when we split for a while, and I had I put a box set of about 4 solo albums. So I thought, well, I could do the solo albums and some Buzzcocks shows, but then a lot of fans said carry on, and I thought, well, Buzzcocks is dead if I don't carry on, and a lot of the fans said it would be great if you carry on. Now, just before COVID, we did 8 shows, and it was phenomenal, It was just as good as it ever was. Obviously, I was blessing Pete up, God bless Pete and all this while the shows. And but it keeps his songs alive, it keeps my songs alive, and it keeps the Buzzcocks alive. And it really did work on those. I think we did about 9 or 10 shows just before the COVID, and it really worked on that. And it's great to keep those songs alive, really,
Yeah.
Because otherwise they'd be, it'd be dead in the water. And of course, we've had the other 2 new guys with us that have been with us for 10 years. So it was still the same lineup. And in fact, Pete said to me on the last few shows just before he died, he'd come to my room a couple of times and he'd say, I'm thinking of retiring, which is kind of weird. And I said, look, well, there's a lot to do. You're not going nowhere. And he told me this. I said, well, you're not leaving me with all this. You're coming with me. And he told me that twice because we'd have a little drink and maybe a little spliff on the balcony of the room at that time. And it was only a few weeks before he died. And I thought that was almost like a kind of blessing to carry on, And it was a difficult decision. We played the Royal Albert Hall. I got a few guests in to fans from other bands, people from The Damned and other people, First and More and all these kind of people. And we did a great tribute at the Royal Albert Hall for him, And then we did those 10 shows. But people are kind of on my side with it now, You had a few of the doubters, but when they came to the gigs, they realised that, the headline was in some paper, he smashed the doubters, We came on to Rocky 2. So I thought, Rocky, can I do it? The comeback, And we came on to the music of Rocky 2, and away it went from there. I started off with What Do I Get? And by the time I got to the chorus, everybody's going, what do I get? And I thought, we're off. We're in here.
That's it.
So that was a great way of doing it. And I'm sure Pete's looking down, and at the gigs, I always go, God bless Pete Shelley a few times in there. And people know what they're getting with it now, People understand the situation. I said, I only want positive people here. Don't come if you're going to complain. It's not the same without Pete Shelley. Because if you could bring him back, I'd be happy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's kind of working, and we did put a single out to go with that tour. Got to Get Better and Destination Zero. You can see it on YouTube. And that's kind of worked as a taster, yeah. It keeps the legacy. On them shows, I dug some songs we haven't played for years. So a lot of the old school punters were happy listening to stuff, And, they were still happy to hear all those great Buzzcocks songs. And that's the main thing, really, isn't it?
But, now that COVID appears to be kind of slowing down a little bit, vaccinations are more readily available. I noticed on Buzzcocks website that you have at least one festival in Scotland this summer. Are you expecting to have more later in the year, or?
Yeah, we just. I mean, just as COVID started, we had a West Coast tour booked, and we was playing the punk rock bowling, and we was going to do a West Coast tour around that, and then do an East Coast tour. And that was all last year, I think, so we was going to do a lot stateside. It was all booked ready, and then the COVID came in and it's all been cancelled. And so now I'm waiting for the agent because there's a hell of a lot of backlog of bands that have booked things over in the UK that have now moved it forward here. So it's hard to get the gigs, or, we will do. It's just got to even itself out.
Right.
So there's one festival booked, and I say we had to cancel the American tour, but we're hoping to get all that back in line again now. But everybody's a bit unsure at the moment what you can actually do, you know what I mean? It's still early days.
But it's getting there.
And it's getting there. This is what's great. I mean, I can't wait. I said, like every musician and everybody in the audience, it's going to be great to do a live gig again. It's the first time in 44 years that over this last year I've never done a show,
Really? 44 years?
Yeah, when we, since the days when we started off back in '76, we played every year. We was always touring, and I realised this is the first time we never toured. Having said that, now I've been writing a lot of songs, so I've got about 2 albums worth. But we're just looking to go in the studio to do a new Buzzcocks album. So. I've been working on that and working on all these compilation albums. It's kind of like every musician, you kind of think, well, what can I do if I'm not doing the shows?
Right.
So we got all them great compilation albums out, which the fans have loved, like you say, and we found demos, and there's even a demo, me on a little 4-track tape machine, all the extra bonus tracks, all kinds of things. And but we're looking forward to doing this new album now, yeah. This new album, I've been working on it hard, and, it sounds like classic Buzzcocks. It's really catchy, and it's got all them Buzzcocks ingredients. I surprised myself, but I've had a year to do this thing. I've gotten up for 2 albums, really. It's kind of like every day because you're not going out. It's like, well, I might as well write another song, But yeah, we're looking forward to that, and we're looking forward to coming to the States, It's on my Facebook and Twitter and that. When you're coming to the States, and it's like, well, we'd be there tomorrow.
Do you have a time frame on when you're hoping to get the album out, or not yet?
It'll probably be out later in the year, hopefully. We're just looking at studios to book because of COVID as well. You've not been able to go in the studio as a band also, I've been writing all the songs at home, and I haven't seen the band really. I haven't seen the band for a year in a sense.
You got to get reacquainted with those guys.
Yeah, I won't know who they are. It's like, who are you? A Buzzcocks, really. So I've been kind of doing that, but interesting. I've gone back to the beginning. I started working on, I've got like 24-track machines, and I've got a 4-track tape recorder as well I've been working on to minimise the thing and also now I've been writing them with just the guitar, like we used to do in the early days, Wow. And I realised that ensures you get a good melody and, good chords, very old school, just like Buddy Holly used to do or Chuck Berry, it's kind of back to that basic songwriting, which with all the modern equipment, iPads and stuff like that, you tend to start getting involved with things,
Oh, yeah.
I've got 8 tracks, I've got 20 tracks, and it's like, if the song's no good, it's no good putting orchestras on if the song's fucking no good, So what I realised, I've come back to the beginning, and I've come back to my Buzzcocks roots of doing that, I've even written a song for him called "Hope Heaven Loves You."
Yeah, it's weird. I interviewed Rat Scabies a couple months ago, and he's in a band called Professor and the Madman. It's a good band, but he and Paul Gray and these other guys, they're living in different continents. 2 guys live in the United States. Rat and Paul live in the UK, and they just send emails with each other with sound files, MP3s, and that's how they put a record together. To me, it's like. That's like a jigsaw puzzle and magic all at the same time.
Yeah, I don't do that. I still work on cassettes and stuff, so I can't send them unless I put it in the post. But what we're going to do, they're going to come to my house because I've got a little setup here, and I'm going to play them the songs live. You know what I mean? It's going like we did in the old days. I'll play them the chords and sing the melody and go, it goes like this, because I want to get that true essence out there.
Right.
I could send those files and all that, but it's kind of like that. It's like touching a woman for the first time, You take it to the band, and, you can't beat that first feeling of touching a woman. It never comes back. So if I sent files out of the music, they're too used to it,
Yep. No, I get it.
Like you're on your third girlfriend by the time you come and record them.
Well, Steve, I can't wait to hear it. I'm looking forward to it. And again, I really appreciate the time today. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Absolute pleasure, yes.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you back out in the States just as soon as we can, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Absolute pleasure.
Again, the box sets include the UA singles 1977 to 1980, 30 Live in London, and Late for the Train. And like Steve said, you can expect a new Buzzcocks album later on this year. Let me know what you think. You can email me at backs@rock102.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time on Baxi's Musical Podcast.